it's a challenge. Like, we love when we can like give people a challenge. Like, Hugh is an actor who has been, you can just tell from his work in the last 10 years, like, this is somebody who wants to challenge himself and do great work. And when you can work with those people, it's like, it's not like, oh, it's a challenge. It's like, oh, my job's so hard. It's like, no, it's a challenge. It's so exciting to like show up every day and like, and try to do something interesting. And we love that.
God, Bryan, thank you so much for taking your time with the movie podcast today. The movie is so much fun. It's so fantastic. We saw it this morning at 8 a.m. and it really got the blood pumping.
Oh, good.
Yeah, very intense.
Yeah.
But it just had this level of fun to it that really resonated with us. So thank you so much for that. So I guess the first thing I'm going to kind of start with here is, how do you feel about awkward questions?
Awkward.
Great way to start.
Awkward questions. I actually love them.
Right.
Because you discover something about yourself in the way you try to navigate that situation. And this movie is so chock full of, I think, our neuroses of being in those situations.
There's an argument to be made that this entire movie is an awkward question.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Because it almost takes so long for that question to finally come out, and that really is a long and awkward question.
Totally.
So my first awkward question is, what were the notes you provided Hugh Grant on his Jar Jar impression?
Oh, Jar Jar.
No notes,
No
10 out of
notes.
10.
I mean, we were even wondering, like, had he done the research to watch Phantom Menace specifically just to nail that Jar Jar impersonation? So it was exciting to see that. Yeah.
I was like, has he watched it? Because I don't know where he's at with your impression, but
He has to, because his process is so in depth. Every single line in the script we poured over. If there was something he didn't know, or where did this come from? What's the lineage or history of this particular conversation? Like, we would go through it and debate it and talk about it. And then anything we didn't talk about, he had researched on his own. Every pronunciation, accent, like, it's insane.
Love that.
The level of detail and research that he went through. So there's no scenario where he didn't watch Star Wars Episode 1 and know exactly what he's doing with Jar Jar. There's no scenario.
Might have watched them all. We all know.
It could be. Yeah.
Right. That's right.
Lego Star Wars.
He could have went.
Yes.
Totally.
Very in depth. There's this charm to Hugh Grant, obviously, that we all love, and he talks a lot about the intellectual versus the physical threats that kind of happen.
Yeah.
When you're figuring out this character, what is it like figuring it out with you?
Oh, with you. I mean, we traded so many emails back and forth for months, like before we were even in the same place, to figure out who this character is from his perspective, because he needed to make sure he could portray it authentically. So much of our back and forth in these emails was scrutinizing these lines of dialogue and him having an understanding of why he's saying what he's doing, or how he's going throughout the night's proceedings, to make sure it all felt like it was based in reality. And so his attention to detail was as much as Reed in the movie has an attention to detail. It was really fun to have that back and forth.
So when you're writing that character, you're thinking, okay, Hugh will ask Hugh if he wants to do this movie?
We're thinking, when we're writing the character, we're thinking, no, like, this is a really challenging role. Mm-hmm. We have no idea who could possibly play this role. We need to find a unicorn. And then once we got into the casting process, we were like, we think Hugh Grant is that unicorn. We think he's got this incredible ability to be really entertaining and dramatic as a performer, but also be realistic. And that very few people can do that. Some people can kind of be bombastic and performative, and it's fun to watch, but you kind of don't really believe it in real life. And other people are very low key and believable. For somebody to do both of those things, which is what we needed for Reed, because he's such a, we need to be able to arrest the audience's attention for such a long period of time with performance and dialogue. He's on a list of one or two people, so we were grateful to get him.
No, it was great, because you don't see him in roles like this. So when you finally see him do something like this, you're like, okay, you're charming as hell, but why am I on my toes?
Yeah, exactly.
So I really love that.
All right, cool.
Something that we also love in your movies is the sound design always kind of feels like its own character.
Yeah.
And this movie especially, it felt even more so. Does that kind of come during the scripting stage of it all, or when you're kind of making it, are you visualizing it at that time?
Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Sound design is so important to us, because it is an extra tool that I think gets overlooked too often. There's a degree at which, like, in the script stage, something like A Quiet Place, certainly, like, you're thinking ahead, but with this movie, we know there's going to be opportunities to really kind of play the different dynamics of what the sound design really is doing psychologically to the characters, but also to the audience. once we're, in pre-production, we're figuring out what our camera moves are going to be and how that kind of interacts with the audio quality of what eventually we'll put in post-production. But our team, our post-production team with our sound designer, Eugenio, who is just coming off of doing the sound design for Longlegs and is going to have like a huge career from here on out.
And our sound mixer, who's done like Interstellar and Paul Thomas Anderson, and he was telling us, we love collecting these stories. He was like, this is like one of the most challenging movies to mix in his entire career. And we're like, thank you for saying that. Cause like, it just means like, it's a challenge. Like we love when we can like give people a challenge. Like Hugh is an actor who has been, you can just tell from his work in the last 10 years, like this is somebody who wants to challenge himself and do great work. And when you can work with those people, it's like, it's not like, oh, it's a challenge. It's like, oh, my job's so hard. It's like, no, it's a challenge. It's so exciting to like show up every day and like, and try to do something interesting. And we love that.
In this movie, you don't almost think that, okay, sound is going to be important, but in horror, it's such a big deal. And especially in this movie, it was just raising the hairs every single second. So very, very cool stuff. And I love that. And I can't wait to see what you guys do next with sound because
thank you.
You guys are crushing in that game.
Oh, thank you.
Did a lot of, I'm assuming, a lot of religious study kind of getting into this film. Is theology something you guys were always interested in, or did this kind of just come about during the process of the movie?
I think so.
Yeah.
Always been interested in cults and everything from Scientology to NXIVM to and then various religious organizations. It's all fascinating to us. There was an immense amount of research that went into this movie, but again, it's not like we have to study for the test. It's like we're just excited to learn about different religions and stuff and kind of pack it into our heads. It just took a long time for the script in particular to like fill our heads with enough stuff that we could write, read, and be fluent with dialogue and not like stop and start and research and then go do the like we wanted to like fill up a little bit so that we could just let it vomit out onto the page.
Yeah, so you're like reading the Torah, the Quran, and the Bible every day, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean,
and philosophers as well, and
but we were kind of
collecting whatever ideas are provocative because it also like outside of being a filmmaker, like just as a human being, like you're able to like engage in what the offerings are of like other thinkers and other institutions and other organizations.
You find so many beautiful things in different, even like things that you would like, oh, that's a cult. Those are dangerous ideas. And it's like, eventually maybe the ideas got dangerous, but they might have started from a really beautiful place. And like maybe that core idea is interesting. It's just interesting to be, as people of the world, to like think about other people, to get inside other people's heads.
No, absolutely. Love that. I love that element of it. And then there's something else that was really cool was the visual language of this movie. You have these miniatures, and it kind of reminded me of Game Night a little bit as well.
Oh, cool! Yeah,
fun.
Yeah.
And you have all these. The candle term, for example, was so specific. What was it like, kind of crafting that visual language around the movie?
Well, it was honestly like crafting the visual language was one of our greatest fears going into the making of this movie because it is such a dialogue piece at times that you want to make sure it's cinematic and it's drawing the characters in a claustrophobic nature over the course of each room to room that you're going in. So with the camera language, I mean, first, thing we did was reach out to Chung Hoon Chung and be like, will you come aboard this movie because you're masterful in everything that you do, but especially movies like Old Boy or Last Night in Soho that have such an incredible look, but it understands the visual language through the story of the characters, which is always the most important thing. You don't want to just make a pretty looking movie just for the sake of it. You want it to evoke some sort of emotion there. So that's on our mind like every step of the way of designing it.
Love that. Sophie and Chloe are also so fantastic. What does collaboration look like with them when you're creating this? I guess you're not trying to create a safe space for them.
Yeah. A lot of it was in pre-production, like asking them to like dig deep into their characters. And so they wrote essays on like who their characters are and what their family life is, what their relationship to religion is as these characters. And just doing that investigation so that they felt so well-rounded that when you get on screen, you don't need to know everything about the character, but you feel like they are lived-in human beings on their own accord, and so that was part of it.
Yeah, and they're two very different performers. They have different like kind of skill sets and processes. Like Sophie's very technical. Like you can give her the mic, 8 minutes into this, long dialogue scene. If you can twitch your eye like that and hit the mark, like she can do that, and it is like clinical. And then Chloe's very like, put her in a situation that feels real, and it will be real for her.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was fun to like kind of try to create the right space that accommodated everybody.
Amazing. Scott, Bryan, thank you so much for your time. Last question I have before we leave is, what is the best religion? No, I'm just kidding. I would never.
Cinema.
That's an awkward question.
That's not
yeah.
No, but seriously, thank you guys so much.
Awesome.
It's fantastic.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We cannot wait to see what you guys do next.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate it.